Ooga booga, ooga booga, ooga booga, ooga booga. Yes, as you can imagine, I'm back. I don't know why, but, you know, it's just the way things work. And... boop! Oh, why is it so dark? Is there a contrast thing here? Use collab camera? No. Let's see here. Oh, lighting in this room is good. Huh. Oh, it looks like the stream is fine as far as the lighting, but the screen that I'm looking at is kind of dark. I'm in the dark! Hello, Glitched Heart. Well, today's topic of Burger Time is going to be talking about the dark times. The dark times before Interplay. Because most people who follow me tend to know either about my video game championships, which is with Centipede, Defender, and of course Space Invaders. But then also they know that I was one of the people who helped found Interplay. Was one of the founders, considering all the work I did for how little money I made. But before Interplay, and around the time of my video game championships, what did I do? And there is a question that no one was asking, but I'm going to answer it anyways. What had happened was that after it was found that I knew how to program Atari 2600 video games, I ended up going to a company called the Avalon Hill Game Company. Kuno no Oni, in other words, Kuno the devil, goes, "Hi Becky, were you there at Interplay when Tim Kaine was?" "Oh yeah, I was there when he got hired. I was there when he left to form Troika." So yeah, he's a very good friend of mine. I remember we had to collaborate quite a bit when he was doing Bard's Tale construction set. Anyways, the question, of course, was whether or not I know Tim Kaine from Interplay. And of course, those of you who don't know who Tim Kaine was or is, he was one of the creators of Fallout. He was the lead engineer on it, as well as many other games. I mean, Fallout's just one of the one he's most famously known for. Now, I think he's at Blizzard, if I'm mistaken. I could be wrong. I mean, I do reserve the right to be wrong. But back to what I was saying. When it was found that I'd reverse engineered the 2600, I went to work for a company called Avalon Hill, and this is one of my games. The reason I even did this Burger Time was because I've been going through my collection of crap and just organizing it, cataloging it, putting it in better storage and better cases so at least I can get to it. And of course, select items end up being driven down to the Video Game History Museum so they could deal with it for the rest of eternity. This here is a Atari 2600 cartridge that I developed over at, was with Will Shepard, I think his name was. I worked with another guy about it because I was still a fledgling programmer and I knew all the low-level stuff, but higher-level stuff I still had some trouble with. But went to work on this, and of course I designed the development kits, the software that driven the Apple IIs to work with this. But inside this box, which has not been opened in like 45 years or something like that, because I think I did this in like 1982, I think it was. Does it have a copyright on this thing? A year? But it's got to be 82 or 83. Let me see here. It's got to have a copyright year on this somewhere. It's the Atari 2600, blah, blah, blah. Trademark. Seriously? Oh boy, yeah. Here's the warranty card. Maybe I should just fill it out and send it in, get some laughs, or return to sender. The instruction manual. And let's see here, what else is there? Yeah, what's funny is this hasn't changed. I mean, here it is, 2023, and the instruction manuals are just about as informative. Yeah, which is turn off console, put cartridge in, turn on console, best of luck. And here's the cartridge as it is inside of the case. I really love the packaging they did here because, a little holder in there. And here's this custom-made shell that we had designed for our Atari 2600 games. I remember when we first had the clay mock-ups, and then later on someone did a test of the injection molding just to make sure it fits an Atari 2600. And then we had to buy, I believe it was a Gemini and a Sears Telegames, of course a couple of 2600s, just to make sure the cartridge fits in all of them. Glitchheart asks, where did your electronics knowledge come from? Learned as you created the dev kit boards? And the answer is yes. I did a talk recently at the Vintage Computer Federation about how I learned how to do it, but I can rehash some of the things here. The dev board was originally an Apple II integer card in which the schematics was available in the Apple II Red Book. I went out to BBS's to learn that, 74LS244 is a monodirectional buffer, 74LS245 is a bidirectional, so you could use the same chip, have the rewrite line, and just went down testing, trying out stuff, testing. I remember that Radio Shack had these little kits that you could buy. You can put wires in to test electric circuits. I used one of those to help me test and understand how the ICs worked. You know, the first thing I had to learn was you have to have power and ground before any of the other pins worked. It wasn't like, you put 2 wires here and it magically makes power coming out on an AND or a NOR gate or something like that. So no, there has to be power and ground, things like that. But it was all self-taught. I got just looking at schematics of the Apple II, looking at the Apple II schematic, because that was the back at a time when you buy a computer and actually had a motherboard and the schematic with all the chips in there, and then you look up the book of the chips that you could buy at Radio Shack back when they sold books like that, which told you what all the chips did, etc. Which is how I reverse engineered the 2600 in order to figure out the pinouts of how this worked, because you open up a cartridge, there's a ROM in there. Since it configured almost identical to a 2716 EEPROM, which you can get the diagrams for, that says, that's what this thing does. And then you wire it in, and you plug in an Apple II board. You could suck out the data, put new data in. But, as my little unboxing video, is that this London Blitz game, because the fact it's in such good condition, it probably would fetch on eBay a couple of $100, if not $1,000. But this was my copy that I got because, back in 1981, when I was making these games, I made a habit to keep a copy or copies of the games I've ever did. So I've got, oh my God, a whole garage full of stuff like this. And of course, this is I like this box a lot better than most of the Atari 2600 boxes, because, you can lift the box up. It's a nice sturdy cardboard. What's funny is the reason it's designed this way is the Avalon Hill Game Company is a board game company. They just simply use the same printing presses they use to make board game boxes and just shrank it. And voila, an instant box for the video games. And it's one of the reasons why this box held up so well, considering this box is built, 1983 minus 23 turns out to be about 40 years. So this cartridge here is almost 40 years old. And look at this, it really holds up. And if I put it into Atari 2600, it'll probably fire up and work just fine. Burn Ya Bad says, Radio Shack had affordable electronic components back in the day. Capacitors, resistors, etc. Nowadays, you can find those cheap parts at university engineering labs. Yeah, that's true. Right now, the only place I can buy electronic components is DigiKey. And, so it's basically mail order for me. But I really do miss the days of being able to go down to pretty much any Radio Shack, and they had 1 to 2 aisles just full of drawers of resistors, capacitors, fuses, breadboards, wire, all those components. In fact, some of them even stocked Apple II breadboards. So you have this blank board so you can make an Apple II peripheral card. And you just put solder in a header board, start wiring with wire wrap, because that's where I got my boards and parts, was from Radio Shack. Nabarine goes, Becky, your super fan has arrived. I have several, so I don't know which one you are. I'm sorry. But after working at Avalon Hill for about, I'd say, 9 months and working on this game and Out of Control, we did 5 games. We did Death Trap, Out of Control, London Blitz, Wall Ball, and Space Shuttle. And I had a hand in all of them. But these two, London Blitz and Out of Control, ones I really worked on those games enough to basically claim more like credit on them. Where there was I contributed code on them and I did work on them, but really the credit goes to other people. Well, after leaving the Avalon Hill Game Company, which of course the reason I was hired was so I could teach them all how to program the Atari 2600 and build all the dev kits for them. I ended up working at a place called Time Warner HBO, which was a fledgling new company, and they wanted to get in on the cable TV Atari 2600 bandwagon. Because there was like 4 or 5 different companies that what they wanted to do was that they wanted to make a cable set-top box that either had an Atari in it, or you could plug a cartridge in and it would make your Atari 2600 a set-top box. That is, you could use it to change the channels, select what's on the cable TV, and of course, if you go to the game channel, it'll download games in your 2600. You can play games all for, what was it? I think they wanted like $19.95. It was over tossing around. The system I worked on never saw the light of day. But I worked on it for like about 3-4 months. It was a Z80-based system with 64K of memory, and it used DMA to push memory into 2600 so we can actually put in high-res text-based graphics, so you can, because the whole idea was you want to put a TV guide up there with readable letters and stuff saying, coming soon is Gilligan's Island on this channel, and MASH was on this channel. But if you go to the G channel, you can play your Atari games. Let's see, Chris, Nabermine writes, have you had playback issues? Yeah, it's not my end. I'm using fiber. Christian Iverson writes, yes, Twitch has been kind of flaky. Yeah, I know it's been issue, but if you replay it later on, it will probably be fine because they are buffering this whole mess. But anyways, let me put this aside. After working at, what was it called? Avalon Hill, went to work for HBO, got the device prototype so it can actually do displays showing a mock-up TV guide, and then I made a mock-up of what it would look like, what's it called? Tempest, in which I was drawing vector beams and stuff like that. It was more of a mock-up. I mean, it had some rudimentary gameplay, but it was not anywhere close to being a finished game. But it was the whole idea was to show that we can do super advanced games using this hardware so that in addition to playing Atari 2600 games, it will actually make better games, so it makes it more compelling. But somewhere around the end of 82, early 83, or was it 81 to 82? It's one of those things where I don't remember the exact dates anymore. All I know is that I was in New York during winter, and that sucked. So it was either the winter of 81 or the winter of 82, but it blew chunks. And it, so when they said that they were canceling the project, I was more, yes, I don't want to live on this planet anymore if it's going to have this white stuff everywhere. Stuff that I was totally, had no idea what it was, because being born and raised in Los Angeles, snow was an alien concept. And I mean it. I literally didn't know what snow was. I was like, why is this stuff white and wet and covering everything? And oh my, plop. Yeah. So, not fun. But after getting back to Southern California, I did a very, very short stint at Atari. it was like, hey, you're hired. Oh, a couple of weeks later, oh, everybody in this building is fired. It's like, well, that was fun. So yeah, I did work for Atari. I don't even think I made it through HR by the time they let everybody go in the building. But that's when I went back home, and I went ahead and called up some old hacker friends in the area, and one of them said, hey, there's a company called Boone that's hiring. So, Boone. Boone is a company that was founded by Michael Boone. Now, he was a Stanford graduate for, and not kidding here, petroleum engineering. So yeah, if you want to find where Daisy the dinosaur died a couple of million years ago, and you want to go suck up her sweet, sweet juice, Mike's the one to call. But for some reason, he liked golf. He met up with some math people over at Stanford who said, hey, we can make a golf game using math. And got himself some investment, and he founded the game company to develop a golf game. Now, in time, the golf game did ship. It was released by Activision in 1984-85, called Championship Courses of the World, Volume 1, Pebble Beach. Because they actually did license the topography of Pebble Beach. And I know because they had these topography maps. We had to put them on an Apple II graphics tablet. And we had some poor sucker sit there and go beep, 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 as they're tracing out all the lines at this elevation, and the next line's at elevation, next line at elevation, so then we can run it through a piece of software which would then make a topographical map with all the appropriate normals, and then that would generate a mathematically accurate representation of Pebble Beach. I mean, this game technically was way ahead of its time, whereas nowadays topographical maps are done by just scanning with your phone. But back then, we had to do it the old-fashioned way, which was an Apple II graphics tablet. Well, because the golf game was going to take quite some time to develop, because the two gentlemen who were developing it were basically taking their sweet time, we needed to make other games. So that's when my first job at Boone Corporation was to do Atari 2600 ports, in which I would take these games from Xonix, Xonx, a brand name of, and again, I'm dating myself, K-Tel Records. If you were alive during the 80s and 90s and you watched television, every other ad was from K-Tel about how you can get these records and how you can get this stuff for $19.95 and ship it to you and from K-Tel. Well, they went ahead and made a series of Atari 2600 games because everybody else was doing it, so why not them? And their shtick was that you get two carts, they call them double enders, in which the cartridge had the ends on both sides. I have a whole box of them downstairs. I should have brought one up. But essentially, you plug the cartridge into your Atari 2600, you play the game, but then you turn off your 2600, pull the cartridge out, flip it around, and plug it in, and you play a completely separate game. That was their gimmick, to get people to say, hey, whereas if you pay $29.95 or $39.95 for a game from Activision, why not pay the same price with us, but you get two games? Granted, they're two crappy games, but it's two games nonetheless. And what was clever was that they just used a double-sized ROM, and then based on which side you plugged in will determine which bank of the ROM it uses. So if you plug it on this end, it makes one line always high, so it uses the upper 4K of ROM. That's game one. Pull it out, flip it around, plug it in. It pulls the line low, so you use the other 4K bank. It plays the other game. So it was quite clever, in which they didn't really have to pay that much more money to make the cartridges. They just simply had to make two games. But of course, if you just get, dum-dums like me who just churn games out like in a weekend, then sure, you can make two games and put it in one cartridge and call it a day. Well, what I did is I went ahead and took the games that I worked on there called Chuck Norris Super Kicks and another one called Robin Hood. And I took those two games from the Atari 2600 and I put them on the VIC-20. So then, therefore, Zonix released a couple of cartridges for the VIC-20, which, again, you flip them around. I think when they went to the Commodore 64, they stopped with the double cartridge thing and they made just one cart. But I do remember having a VIC-20 version of the double ender cart, in which one side was Robin Hood, the other side was Chuck Norris Super Kicks, and it was both of the games I wrote. But then afterwards, I started working on doing some Commodore 64 games. But Boone said, you know what, these ports are good, but they don't really kind of pay the kind of salaries that the upper management wants. Because you see, as a programmer, I think my paycheck was like $10K a year. And remember, this is 1983, so $10,000, while it isn't that much money, I could still afford an apartment, because I think I paid like $800 a month, was it $500 a month? Or $800? It was something like that. It was called the Beach House Apartments on 1433 Superior Avenue, Newport Beach. And I think I was apartment 339. You know, of course, I could say this now out because I don't live there anymore. I haven't lived there in 40 years. But that was where I lived because the office was not that far from there. So what was it? It was in Costa Mesa. I'll have to look it up. I remember the building and so forth. But the Boone needed to start realizing that we need to make our own games and start publishing them. And that's what I said, well, I made original games, and another gentleman, a guy named Alan Pavlish, came by and says, I made original games, and then that's when this got created. This was actually mostly written by Alan Pavlish. I'm trying to remember. Oh, in fact, heck, there's the address right in the back. 2900-A Bristol Street, Suite 102, Costa Mesa, California. Game number 20,001. From copyright 1983, Boone Corporation. But Crater Raider was essentially a game that was kind of a ripoff of Moon Patrol, except instead of you being in a vehicle, you're just a guy running around in a spacesuit. But you're just jumping over craters, picking up oxygen, and just getting to see how far you can get. Of course, this was written in a glorious, I think it was maybe 2K ROM or a 4K ROM, but it can't be more than a 4K ROM. Then, this one, Cyclone, was an actual ripoff of a arcade game. I think it was called Base Attack or something, where it's just this base in the center, and you have a joystick, and you push up, down, left, and right, and you just shoot in those directions. And then a ship would just appear on the up, down, left, and right, and as soon as the ship appears, you just shoot in that direction. And it's just a Twitch game. That's all the game is. That's what this game is, in which you have the center base. I don't know if you can see it in the camera here, but yeah, you have the center base, you just move your joystick, shoot around, and with each level, gets harder and harder because the reaction time gets shorter and shorter to the point where as soon as a ship appears, you only have literally less than a second to react to shoot it before its bullet hits you. But that's the entire point of the game. This one I think is a 2K-er. In fact, to give you an idea, I have several copies of the games because I have boxes of them. See, like here's 2 copies of Cyclone. I don't remember which one's which because one of these was actually a this is the one. One of these was a pre-release copy. In fact, it says right here. In which we got reviewers and people like that who we would send out copies to get good magazine articles written for reviews. Because, back then, all advertising was done through magazine ads and through, basically magazine ads and occasional trade shows. And, of course, video game stores. I mean, I remember we spent money on these posters that you can hang up in your video game stores. Some of them we had to pay them to, we had to pay them to put them on particular shelves, because that's what Fry's did to us and so forth. And of course, here's the manual, and this is an actual painting. Don't know who owns the painting right now, but yeah, we commissioned a painting to be done. We then scanned it in, and then that was the basis of the artwork of the game. And then later on, we did a game of Demon's Forge. I actually have the box here somewhere for Demon's Forge, because that was a game Brian Fargo did, but we actually had a painting made for it, which for a while I had hanging on my wall. It's currently hanging on Brian Fargo's wall, because, I mean, after all, he did create Demon's Forge. But the... how to say it? Let's see. Yeah, that was the game going to be Apple II, and what we were doing color coding. It's like this game, see, here's how the rainbow color, but the Apple II, this is going to be yellow. The VIC-20 was purple. The Commodore 64, I believe, was red. So that way you could tell quickly which console your games went to by basically what box that we used. And of course, these games here are very rare, especially, you know, almost mint in box. These will, of course, all end up at the Video Game History Museum. But that was the games I worked on that I actually have copies, because what happens, I was going through my collections and finding all these things, and I thought maybe I should just show these things off and show that I have, like, multiple copies of these silly things, because unlike other people, I actually preserve my history, and every time I make a game, I always make it a point to get a couple of copies in boxes, so I can then put them, like, on my shelf back there, and trust me, there are other rooms in this house that there's a hell of a lot more shelves than what's back here. So for a moment, I'm going to go ahead and see what's up in the peanut gallery and see what's happening here. So one person asks, let's see here, dating yourself, I thought you were married. Yeah. Let's see, they're still repeated in the late 90s. Don't really know, but really cheap for 16 gigs. Corsair. The more RAM, the faster to compare large files. Yeah. I guess somebody was talking about comparing large files, and yes, more RAM's always good. True for speeds, Quantus compiles even for... What's this thing they're talking about here? Nabermine asks, do you enjoy MMOs? Actually, I enjoy them. I haven't really been playing them much, only because if I allow myself to get involved in an MMO, I will find that my brain is gone, and I will be sucked into it, and there goes all my free time, and I have work to do. One person says, StarPath Supercharger, that interface cassette loading to the 2600. Must be referring to, like, my PlayStation, sorry, my Play Cable box enhanced the Atari 2600. So StarPath Supercharger actually shipped. I actually have one on my shelf right there on the far, right where my finger's pointing, right at the top. The StarPath Supercharger had 6K of memory, a ROM that allowed you to download stuff off of a cassette tape, and by using a cassette tape to distribute cartridges instead of a cartridge, it's far, far cheaper, so they can make more money when they sell the games to you. And of course, because of the kits, what's it called? When a cassette has far more space on it, so you can actually make games that are far, far bigger than 8K without having to spend a Google amount of money in order for you to make the cartridges that size. Because remember, back in 1983, a 4K cartridge was still like $5. And, you know, when you factor in the price of the cartridge at the retail, that's a lot of money. Let's see here. Enhancing with RAM drives, killer trying to tweak only bit of code and logic, extra RAM, cosmic arc, dark lighting. Yeah, I know. I was talking about the fact that I've got dark lighting. I don't know why. 3DO blaster spotted on shelf. Yes, that is a 3DO blaster, new in box. To say it's a dark history. The schematics of the 3DO. Hope the schematics of the 3DO blaster get released. I have no idea if any of those things got released. It would be nice, you know, somebody. Person writes, the game is called Cyclone Boone. No. The game is called Cyclone, but sold by the Boone Corporation. Which, fun fact with the Boone Corporation, one of the reasons he shut down the company, which is why we ended up sitting around the lunch table going, well, we're fired. What are we going to do? Let's form our own company. Interplay was born. Was because he had this idea, and again, I'm not making this stuff up, to sell popsicles at the swap meet. Yeah, going from making video games to selling popsicles at the swap meet. Okay. What's hilarious was that the man made money and used that to make a whiteboard company, which became Boone Boards, which made him a millionaire. So, go Mike! And one person writes, is that a VIC-20? It says, person says, do you have a copy of 2GS Wolf 3D? I have many copies of 2GS Wolf 3D. I have the source code too, so there's that. The 3D uses weird graphics. RAM very similar to Genesis. No, the 3DO uses just memory-based history lesson. The 3DO traces its origins from the Amiga. So if you look at the design of how the Amiga drew art using the blitter and how its memory was done and how the operating system was a multi-threaded, multitasking operating system, just replace the CPU from a 68,000 to an ARM, that's a 3DO. I mean, fundamentally, hardware-wise, the 3DO's main enhancements over the Amiga was that the blitter can do twisting and bending where the blitter couldn't. The blitter can do scaling, but the 3DO's blitter can do rotations and stuff. The 3DO had a digital signal processor to do audio decompression on the fly with hardware. And, of course, its main CPU is an ARM32. The CPU model was an ARM3. And I think the instruction set was the part number was like ARM 610. I think was the part number, and it was the ARM3 instruction set. Let's see here. Glitched Heart, LOL. Let's see what Glitched Heart had to say. She did say it was Dark History. Yes. Let's see. I knew I recognized that name. Alan Pavlich made Wasteland. Not to mention a bunch of other games we were playing back in the day. Yep. That's that same Alan Pavlich. Now, last I heard, he's doing poker games. Live poker. Actual betting poker games. Let's see. Use the Apple II for a long time? Yes. Could be misrepresenting. I think you mentioned working on a SNES game at some point using that machine. Okay. Drew Bedooble. Drew Bedooble, I guess. Around 1979, I got into the Apple II, and I've been developing, in fact, all these games I just showed you, these VIC-20 games and this Atari game, they were developed on Apple IIs. That was my development system. Originally, it was like Big Mac was the assembler I used, and later on was Merlin, but all of these were developed on Apple IIs. So, yeah, I've been Apple IIing for all eternity. But I then continued doing it. I did Super Nintendo games on my Apple II. I did a Game Boy game, Track Meet, Apple II, and I did a PC game called Dragon Wars. I wrote the PC version of the game using an Apple II editor. I just simply copied it to a PC transporter, used MASM to build it, and that was how the game was developed. Let's see. Game's weird. Becky, you and Alan Pavlich were behind most of my childhood and made me a lifetime gamer. Thank you. You're welcome. That was from VHYE76. So VHYE76. You're welcome. Recall games like Alternate Reality and Atari, which intro nice graphics. Rubber Cell Popsicles. I believe Apple II to help with some of the coding porting. Yes, I did use the Apple II. Also, the Super Nintendo version of Another World and Super Nintendo version of Wolfenstein 3D were also done on Apple II. It was the Orca C compiler was what compiled the main code, and then all the low-level stuff was done in assembly. Let's see. Originally ARM 10, BIOS, ARM 10 consumer units. Let's see. Person asks, can you make a modern Bard's Tale Burger Becky? The answer is yes. Could I? Well, it belongs to Microsoft, and it really depends on whether or not I can strike a deal of some kind. The only thing that's really negative right now is that there was a Bard's Tale 4 made by a company called In Exile that didn't do that well in the marketplace. I mean, when I first saw the games, I was like, that's wrong, that's wrong, that's wrong, that's wrong. So I know how to do it right, but again, it's back to Microsoft owns the rights, and I wouldn't be surprised if In Exile has first right of refusal of any Bard's Tale game. And who knows, maybe they're working on a Bard's Tale game for all I know. I know they announced a steampunk game, but these are things that I not know. But yes, I would very much like to do another Bard's Tale game, but since I'm so busy, and the fact is that I don't really have a couple $1 million in my bank account in order to fund such development, not happening. MCWLL, these names, asks, Becky, did you do the Bard's Tale port of Famicom, or was it all on the Japanese side? Actually, I did some of the work on that. I do speak Japanese. In fact, I think I have a copy of it. Where is it? But I do know there is a copy of the Famicom version on that. There, it's laying down on its side. That's why you can't see it. But yeah, I have a copy of it too, inbox. But it was done for the regular Nintendo, not Super Nintendo. Was it FCI? I can't remember. I just remember that the team came, and then we also had to talk with them about doing Dragon Wars. I don't remember that one actually getting shipped or something like that. But I do remember working on that, just making some of the layouts. But the biggest difference was having to completely redo the interface to make the game work better for the joypad. The Nintendo 8-bit joypad. Let's see here. Got your nerd cred back. I still have my Bard's Tale game in original boxes. Good for you. I bought Bard's Tale for the Super Nintendo for my console. I don't think Bard's Tale ever came out for the Super Nintendo. I know it was out for the 8-bit. Remember watching an old session where you talked about the Game Boy game and how the first thing I think people talk of is a scope creep, especially through management. Yeah, Drew Bedoobie writes about a game I did called Track Meet. Now, in my channel on YouTube, there is a talk about it called Game Boy, and I suggest you going to that talk. It was a story of how feature creep can take what sounds good at first, which was, let's do a very quick game so we could ship it out at the launch of the Game Boy, into an extravagant monster of a game that has no idea what it's supposed to be. It took about 9 months to almost a year to develop it. All the while was moonlighting, doing other projects to keep myself sane. And of course, every time the boss would walk in and have another idea, I finally got to the point where I finally learned to say no. And then we shipped the game, finally. But it was like, oh! And it is a poster child for feature creep and why you need to learn to say no. Or at least say, we'll put it in Track Meet 2, or we'll put it in the sequel. Nice idea. Let's put it in the next game because we got to ship this one first. Electron Ash writes, Becky, I recall you said you used the DMA register on a CPU to speed up some code for the Motherworld port. Yes, I did. That was because Interplay was too cheap to give me a fast ROM. So what I did was I just simply found out that the DMA registers ran at the high speed where the ROM ran. The ROM runs at 2.8 megahertz. The Super Nintendo can run up to 3.6 megahertz. And the DMA registers and other parts in the Super Nintendo ran at 3.6 megahertz. So I was able to put little tiny pieces of code into the registers and call it knowing that it was running at 3.6 megahertz. And since it was talking to the main bus inside of the Super Nintendo, everything was running at the full speed. Like color fill and stuff like that. I know emulator authors hated my guts for that, but hey, you got to get the frame rate up, and there are times in which the the boss says, look, I just want to spend money, or I don't want to take away a feature or something like that. Can you figure out how to deliver this? And, and of course, for me, I dreamt of horrible, horrible deaths for this person, because it was like, can you just throw me one bone? Just one bone. Track Meat uses a 2GS Shaston font. I was like, hey, I know that typeface. Guilty as charged. Yep, that was... because it was developed on a 2GS. Go figure! Yeah, that was referring to a game I did called Track Meet, which is for my first game on I think... Yeah, I worked on the second game for the Game Boy, but that never got finished. It was Omar Sharif on Bridge was the game. But the first game, I needed some fonts, so I just used my Apple 2GS font because it looked good. One person writes, I hacked Merlin on a C128 in 64 mode to compile in 2 megahertz mode. Cred. Don't think I own this. Well, anyways, I really came just to show off these cartridges. London Blitz, Cyclone, Craterator, Boone Corporation, rest in peace. And talk a little bit about some of the crap we had to do back then about Zonix games. We had a saying at Boone. It's like, you better be good if we're going to make you do a Zonix game. I was not very good. But other than that, any last minute questions before I go ahead and release you all back into the wild? Because I have been rambling for like about 40 minutes according to this clock. So, going once? Going twice? Nabermine asks, what am I working on now? What am I working on is I am wrapping up a game called Luxor Evolved, working with several very talented programmers, Wendy Jones, Connie, can't remember her last name, but I know Claire Robsham. They worked on it originally, but now it's just Wendy and I working on these things. Most of our time right now is because the games are pretty much done. Our problem is just getting just one more port done, which is like a low priority one for them. But the others are like just getting through their cert teams to get them submitted to for the PlayStation, for the Xbox, and for the Switch. I mean, the game's pretty much done. So just hopefully soon we'll be able to do press releases and show the game and stuff like that. Hopefully that'll be soon. But that's what I'm working on. In addition to the fact that we can now announce it, Farazel's Wand. We licensed it from Ben Spies, formerly of Ambrosia. Now he's doing his own thing, but he got the rights back to his game, and we went in and licensed it. And now I've been going deep in the code, taking it from Mac OS 7. And we're talking here 68K PowerPC Mac OS 7 for your iMac, to more modern machines. So I've been going through the code, updating it, getting it to compile, that kind of stuff. But hopefully we'll be getting it up and running on Windows soon. Not going to say when, but we're working on it. And that's currently my current project. Electronic Ash writes, Becky, roughly how many EEPROM cart emulators did you build for other software houses back in the day? That's a reference for Sluggo, the Atari 2600 board that I made for the Apple II. Well, I was also a fan of Saturday Night Live, and they were always picking on Mr. Bill, and it was a Sluggo. And so I thought, this board is going to be mean to my Atari 2600, so it's going to be a Sluggo. And the Atari 2600 goes, oh, you're going to be mean to me! It says, oh no, it's Mr. Sluggo! I built about 10 Sluggos for the Avalon Hill. Then at Time Warner HBO, I think I built 3 of them, slightly more advanced model. And then we went to an actual in-circuit emulator, which was amazing. Then at Interplay, at Boone Corporation, I maintained my old original Atari Sluggo from Avalon Hill, so I just used that. But I had to do some modifications to get it to work with a Commodore VIC-20 and a Commodore 64. And then later on, there was the Sluggo 2, which is a circuit board version of Sluggo 1. So they're basically the same thing, which one's a wire wrap mess, and then the other one is an actual soldered mess. And then when I went to work with Interplay, well, like I said, I was doing the side project just to keep myself sane. That's when Sluggo 3 was born, and it was a giant board that was designed to do 8-bit Nintendo games, so that therefore it actually had two ROM emulators inside of it. One of it was for the character ROM, one was for the coding ROM, and you plugged it into your Apple II with a parallel interface. But because I used the parallel interface, and this is intentional, you can then plug it to a PC. And then I built about 50 of them, and I sold, I think, like about 15 to Interplay, 10 to Blizzard, and the others were just miscellaneous friends and other development studios. I think, what was it? Visual Concepts got a couple. I know Designer Software bought a few. And of course, they're all expandables and so forth. But I built about 50 of them. I mean, that was some good business. And of course, I wrote all the software for it that drove the thing. And for Blizzard, I made a version of it that had a debugger in it. So because that's what they used to do Lost Vikings. And what was the other one? Lost Vikings, Rock and Roll Racing, RPM Racing. They were done on the Sluggo emulation board. Now, granted, they were using a PC for the host, so all their Super Nintendo code was done on a PC. But the Sluggo was, plugged in through a parallel port and did the job that way. Let's see here. Please get a Steam port of Please or Linux. Nevermind's asking for a Steam port or Linux, but I don't know what you're referring to. Are you referring to Luxor Evolved, or are you referring to Frazel's Wand? We'll get back to you on that. See, Christian Iverson writes, didn't they enforce Objective-C? I'm thinking you're referring to modern macOS coding. Well, the trouble is you can write in Objective-C, and some of their interfaces are Objective-C, but you can write your main game in C++. I mean, all the games I write are 100% C++, or usually just C or with some assembly. But, some things like the Metal API is Objective-C, and you just simply, call the functions using Objective-C calls. Thankfully, the compiler allows you to write C and Objective-C in the same source file. Nevermind writes, have you met John Romero? I've worked with him. I've worked with him for many, many years, especially when he was back at Softdisk. Then they were Ideas from the Deep, and then he was at id, both at the Cube, that's not too far from here, and then I was at the Apple II party in 1998, which he held at the Ion Storm building. In fact, I still have the invite, still up there, it's on one of the shelves. But yeah, I know John Romero. Saw your Wikipedia page, you've had a collection of bootleg 2600. Do you still own them? Well, the trouble is that the bootleg 2600 games are just floppy disks, they're just files. So you just go to, if you want the files, just go to Internet Archive and download them all, because the files are the same as what I have. I mean, I literally just took a cartridge, dumped it, and there was the file. And, let's just say that I'm now the only person who's dumped the cartridges, so there's nothing unique about those files. See, a lot of dev houses using your carts. Yes, the game Luxor. Luxor does support Steam. It already supports Steam. So the question is, Luxor Evolved, does it support Steam? In fact, I just had a conversation with Wendy today about the Steam support, so yes, I could say it supports Steam. Linux, probably not. Let's see. Are you still in the business? No need to state company or projects you're working on. Yeah, I own a video game company called Old School, and I just posted a picture of this board right here with all the connected all the dev kits here. So yeah, I'm still. We're always looking for work, but yeah, we're doing stuff. And someone asked him, John Romero, about his shampoo. Okay, ask John Romero about what shampoo he uses. His hair is kind of magical. Well, it does give him his power. I mean, like Samson, you cut off that hair, he loses all his power, and it'll shrivel up into a mushroom. But But anyways, it is bordering on an hour. It's now 49 minutes, and I was intending this to be half an hour. And so in order to no longer bore everybody who's listening to this mindless drivel, I will bid everyone adieu until next time. If you ever want to give me topics to think about for another Burger Time, you can also give an excrement on X, or Twitter as it formerly was called, or you can reach me at Blue Sky. I'm on Mastodon. I'm on Threads. I'm basically where all the cool kids are. And you can just tweet me there or whatever they call them. But